thank you very much to all the prairie potholes all over the Houston region who protect us and serve us.
God bless the prairie.
God bless the prairie potholes. And so we also are talking about the humans, and we're talking about human habitat. And a lot of what we at Houston Tomorrow have done over all these years is talking about how do we equitably, meaningfully plan for our future for these humans. And for a long time we've had this crazy concept that it's weird that the city of Houston is the only large city without a comprehensive plan based upon citizen values. And it happens that September 30th, as of September 30th, Houston now has a plan. And Plan Houston was adopted by the city council, and it was based upon citizen values. And as the nerds who've been talking about this for 17 years or whatever, we always would fight about what that means, and like we would have there were 3 different Blueprint Houston Citizen Congresses, brought 1,000 people into a room together, and they all clicked on their thing, and they built a vision for Houston. But then, was that equitable? And did people have transit access to get to that meeting? And so, core of all of this work in Houston Tomorrow, we try to base what we do upon what we think the people of Houston want. And so we have a source, we have a font of wisdom in Houston, and that font of wisdom and his students and staff is about to talk to you. But I think at this moment with Plan Houston, that part of that push all these years is that we were backed by some science on what Houstonians thought about Houston and what they thought they wanted for Houston. And that was crucial. And no other city knows enough about what it thinks it wants than Houston. Because of our next speaker, Dr. Klineberg.
Well, thank you all so much, and what a great honor to follow John Jacob, and I'm glad that the humans still have a role to play in this process. And the city has been changing dramatically, and I just want to, we all know it, and I want to share as quickly as I can, so you really want to get into discussion, and it's getting cold. But we are in the midst of an epic transition. An earlier generation, overwhelmingly Anglo, is rapidly aging and is being replaced by a new generation of Americans, largely immigrants, and the children of immigrants, a mix of all the ethnicities of the world. Nowhere do you see that more clearly than in Houston, Texas. So let me just remind us of how dramatic have been these changes. Why here, why now? This remarkable demographic revolution that's occurring across America, particularly in Houston. Here's the number of immigrants coming to America in each of the decades, the 1820s, the 2000s. Basic stories between 1492 and 1965. 82% of all the human beings on the face of this earth who came to American shores came from Europe. We were operating in the last 40 years of that period under one of the most viciously racist laws that sought to restrict immigration to just Northern Europeans. Immigration plummets after that. That's the Great Depression, and then World War II, and the terrible aftermath of World War II. Immigration, the restrictive laws could not survive the shifts of consciousness with the civil rights movements. In 1965, Congress changed the law thinking nothing would change. Everything changed. In the 1960s, 3.5 million immigrants suddenly came to America. Only 38% were from Europe. In the 1970s, 5 million came, only 18% were Europeans. 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, 10 million immigrants per decade were coming to America. 88% coming from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. And the United States, and throughout all of our history, have been an amalgam of European nationalities, is becoming a microcosm of the world. The first nation in history that can say we are a free people and we come from everywhere. It's a remarkable change at the same moment as the American economy becoming fully integrated, a single global economic system. Immigration is network driven. You go where you know people. 2 cities still today, Los Angeles and New York, are the immigration capitals of America, followed by lesser magnet cities, Chicago, Miami, San Francisco, Houston. followed right after Houston by San Diego, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Boston, Atlanta, spreading to every city and town across America. No city has been transformed as fully, as completely, as suddenly, as irreversibly as Houston, Texas. Here are the census figures for the first 3 decades of the oil boom years. Here was our biracial world. The basic story of Houston, this was a biracial southern city dominated and controlled throughout all of its history by white men. And in the space of the last 30 years has become the single most ethnically diverse major metropolitan area in the entire country. Here was our biracial world. In 1960, there were 1.243 million people living in Harris County, Texas. 74% of us were Anglos, 20% African Americans, 6% Hispanics, less than 1% were Asians. During the oil boom years, Anglos poured into Houston in the 60s and 70s. This is where the jobs were. By 1980, Houston became the 4th largest city in America, still an overwhelmingly Anglo city. The story of Houston is that after the oil bust of 1982, 33 years ago, the Anglo population of Harris County stopped growing. And all the growth of this, the most rapidly growing city in America, all of it has been the influx of African Americans, Latinos, and Asians. Here are the last 3 decades. Anglo population has actually dropped. The African American population has continued to grow at about the same rate as the population as a whole. Surging populations of Asians and Latinos. By 2010, Harris County is now 41% Latino, 33% Anglo, 18% African American, 8% Asian. 2 things I point to here very quickly. Number 1, just imagine how different the story of Houston would have been if we had not become one of the great magnets for the new immigration of the last 30 years. This city would have lost population. Houston would have had the same fate as other major American cities across the country that are losing their status as major cities. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Buffalo. Instead, Houston is one of the most vibrant, rapidly growing cities in America, tremendous entrepreneurial economy, lasting no recession, first one to come out, an unemployment rate of 4 percentage point below the national average, purely because of the tremendous energy, vitality, commitment, and hard work of immigrants pouring into this city from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. No city has benefited more from immigration than Houston, Texas. And it's ironic, but I guess not surprising to see anti-immigrant attitudes in Houston and think of how different the story of Houston would have been. If we had been like Philadelphia in 1980, we were the same size. For one reason or another, Philadelphia never became the magnet that Houston has been for the new growth of the 21st century. And the other point about Houston is that we have a more even distribution among the 4 great communities of America than any of the other multi-ethnic melting pot cities. Miami has very few Asians. San Francisco has very few Latinos. Los Angeles has very few African Americans. This is where the 4 communities meet in greater balance, greater equality. All of us minorities, all of us call on to build something new under the sun, a truly successful, inclusive, equitable, multi-ethnic society that will be Houston and Texas and America in the 21st century. Here's a quick way to envision what has been going on. This is Harris County in 1980, 1,220 census tracts in Harris County. In blue are all the census tracts that were majority Anglo, and then the majority African American was the 3rd ward and the 5th ward in that red area. That's not going to change in the next 40 years, the hyper-segregation of blacks in the inner city of Houston. And along the ship channel, the Segundo Barrio, where the Latinos were. Right? And then very few places around the beltway in that olive color with no majority. So that's 1980, here's 1990, here's 2000, and here's 2010. Isn't that incredible? No one having planned this. No one consulted with me before all these people came. Houston finds itself at the forefront of the demographic transformations that are occurring across all of America. And it's not just numbers, it's also ages. And this comes back to that epic transition of the aging of Anglos and the disproportionate numbers of younger folks who are non-Anglo. I have babies on the left and old people on the right. This is Harris County figures. I've got 12 different age categories from under the age of 5 to over to 75 years old or older. And here, somewhat to my chagrin, is where the Anglos are. Ladies and gentlemen, the baby boom. It's only when you reach people in Harris County, Texas today who are over the age of 63 that you still find a majority of folks are Anglos. And at each younger age group, the percentage of Anglos plummets. The percentage of African Americans, Asians, and above all Latinos surges. Here's where everybody else is. So this is as powerful a picture as I can offer you of Houston's present and future. Of everybody in Harris County, Texas today, Harris County, right, who is under the age of 20, everybody aged 19 and younger in Harris County, 51% are Latinos, 19% are African Americans, 9% are Asians, 22% are Anglos. So two big points very quickly. Number one, 70% of everybody in Harris County under the age of 20 is African American and Latino. The two groups overwhelmingly most likely to be living in poverty. We know what poverty does to your ability to succeed in the public schools. It is a safe statement to make that if Houston's African American and Latino young people are unprepared to succeed in the global knowledge economy of the 21st century, it is impossible to envision a prosperous future for Houston. And the other point is that this is a done deal. Close the borders, build your fence, close off America, round up those 10 million people you think are here illegally and send them wherever you think they're supposed to. 60-year-old Anglos are not going to be making a whole lot more babies. We'll do the best we can. We'll work on it every chance we get. You can go to the bank on this, right? No force in the world is going to stop Houston or Texas or America from becoming more Asian, more African American, more Latino, and less Anglo as the 21st century unfolds. Nothing in the world can stop that. So the only question our generation has been given is, okay, how do we make this work? How do we ensure that this diversity becomes a tremendous asset that it can be as we build a city that is in tune with nature as well as with the diversity of our populations, and make sure it doesn't end up tearing us apart and becoming a major liability, reducing rather than enhancing our competitiveness in the global economy. Much depends on how this generation speaks to this remarkable convergence of two revolutionary changes that have made the 21st century a different place than most of us thought it was going to be. A new economy where education has become absolutely critical and inequalities are accelerating, predicated on access to quality education, and a demographic revolution. So this very quickly is Harris County. Here is Texas. Texas is about 2 years behind Harris County. That's the story. Texas and California, two largest states in the Union, both of which are majority minority states. Here's America, still an Anglo country, but of course the same pattern of aging of Anglos and the fewer Anglos as you get younger. And the census announced very shortly after they gave us the figures for this chart that across all of America, of everybody in this country under the age of 6, the majority are now African American, Latino, and Asian. And they said, you want to know what America will look like in 2050? Let's assume no immigration. So it's as conservative an estimate as you can get. Just go by the actuarial tables. Here's what they tell us America will look like in 2050. So that's basically Houston today. So when I tell people, I think with some real justice, is how Houston navigates this transition will have enormous significance, not just for the Houston future, but for the American future. All of America is going to look like Houston looks today in about 25 years. And this is one of the critical places where the American future is going to be worked out. Meanwhile, Houston will become more and more Latino. Here are the census estimates for the future of Houston. 4 million now, going to 6.5 million, what we were talking about before. How do we accommodate that growth? I'll show you a little bit of some of our findings that suggest we may be able to do it and still protect those wonderful wetlands, but only if we find a way to build that density. But here's the distribution. So here is Harris County today, 41% Latino, 33% Anglo, 18% African American, 8% Asian, and here's what the census projects, assuming that immigration continues at about half the rate that it did in the decade from 2000 to 2010. Here it is in 2020 at 4.7 million, 2030 at 5.3 million. Now a majority are Latinos. At 2040 at almost 6 million, and in 2050. Wow, right? There it is. That is who we are. That is what our future will be. That is how Houston will deal with and navigate and address these critical issues of sustainability as the 21st century unfolds. And just very quickly, looking at attitudes, every question we ask about coupled with diversity, about support for immigration. We ask a random representative sample of Harris County residents identical questions, asked exactly the same place in the questionnaire of a sample drawn exactly the same way in the last 2 weeks of February, the first week of March. Margin of error with 1,000 respondents of plus or minus 3%, so a change of 5 or 6 percentage points could be random fluctuation. A change of 7 or 8 percentage points tells you people are answering the question differently today than they did the last time the question was asked. Would you like to see the U.S. admit more, the same number, or fewer immigrants in the next 10 years as we did in the last 10? Percent saying more, the same number goes to 72% of granting illegal immigrants a path for legal citizenship. They speak English and have no criminal record. Do immigrants to the U.S. today generally contribute more to the American economy than they take, or do they take more than they contribute? Percent saying they contribute more than they take went from 45 to 49 to 51%. Two things happening here, I think. Number one, Houston has had 30 years now of being a city of immigrants. And all the anxiety we felt at the beginning is dissipated by recognizing how much immigrants have brought to the communities, how much richer Houston is than it would otherwise have been. We get wonderful national press, which we never used to get before. Houston is the best place in America to eat out in. Wonderful food, wonderful variety of immigrant. That's what has made Houston such a fascinating and beautiful place. And secondly, immigration, my Republican friends to the contrary notwithstanding, immigration has basically ended. There's been net zero immigration from Latin America in the last 2 years. So the Pew Research Center announced that in 2012, more Mexicans, they think, left the United States to go to Mexico than left Mexico to come to America. For the first time since the new immigration, more Asian immigrants are coming to America than Latino immigrants. But above all, the growth of Latinos and Asians in America is no longer new immigrants. It is the 100% American kids who are the children of the immigrants who have come before. And the single most powerful predictor, single most powerful predictor among Anglos of comfort with this diversity, that I will share with you very quickly, is age. And here's one sort of indicator. Have you been in a romantic relationship with someone who is not Anglo? We asked them the Anglo respondents. And those under 40, 45, 50, 57% said, thank you for asking. Yes, indeed. And here it is for us older Anglos. And I'm afraid the hearts are going to get a little bit smaller here. So it's a powerful reminder that we older Anglos grew up in a different world. The world of the 60s and 70s was a different place than the world of the 1990s and 2000s. There's a law of human nature that says what I am familiar with feels right and natural. What I'm unfamiliar with feels unnatural and somehow not quite right. Every question we ask of Anglos shows this pattern with age. Here's just a few examples from last year's survey. 70% of Anglos under the age of 30 say the increasing effort diversity in Houston brought about by immigration is on balance a good thing for the city of Houston. And almost 50% of Anglos over 60 say it's a bad thing for Houston. Support for illegal immigrants and path for legal citizenship, and then strikingly 66% of Anglos under 30 say the increasing immigration into this country today mostly strengthens American culture. 62% of Anglos over 60 said the new immigration threatens American culture. Not surprising, I guess. Right? That's what it means to live in a time of such remarkable, fundamental change. I tell people we got to be gentle with us older Anglos. This is a big change. Younger Anglos are saying, "What's the big deal? This is America. This is what I love about this country and this city." And it's a whole different kind of dynamic that bodes well, I think, for the long-term future of cities like Houston. And then I want to show you one other thing that ties in very powerfully with our themes today. This is, as John was saying, as we all know, Houston has been, here's an example of a whole bunch of things that Houston has been doing in the last 5 or 10 years to make it into a more beautiful and interesting and healthy city. Recognizing, as a business community does, that if it's going to succeed in the 21st century, Houston's location in the East Texas oil fields that counted for everything in our prosperity in the 20th century is going to count for less and less, and eventually for zilch in the 21st century. Houston's success depends on being able to attract the best and the brightest people in America, working at the cutting edge of knowledge, able to put that knowledge into commercial ventures. The resource of the knowledge economy is housed between the ears of the best and the brightest people in America who can live anywhere. And suddenly quality of life issues, never important for Houston. Who cares if it smells? It's a smell of money. Suddenly it becomes central to Houston's positioning itself for prosperity. And the city has been, I think you can see that right where we are right now, and the Bayou Greenways initiative, the bayous concretized in the cheapest possible way by the Army Corps of Engineers to serve as drainage ditches for our flooding problems, being turned into linear parks. One of the most interesting things that ties in powerfully to our discussion today is that this is, with all these other great things, the most spread out, least dense, most automobile-dependent city in all of America. Let me just remind us of this. This is the city of Houston. That's up here, of course, is our last two annexations. We may never annex again after that experience. This is what Kingwood up here and Klineberg down here. 600 square miles. It's the city of Houston, and it contains 2.1 million people. And 600 square. Do you know how big 600 square miles is? You could put inside the city limits of Houston, Texas, simultaneously, I kid you not, the cities of Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, and Philadelphia. Those four cities cover the same geographical space as the city of Houston. And they contain between them 5.5 million people. The city of Houston has little over 2 million. Then you go out to the greater Houston metropolitan area, which is a whole area that is endangering all the remaining ecosystems and wetlands. The greater Houston metropolitan area here, of course, is Harris County. This is Fort Bend County. I didn't get to show you. Fort Bend County, we honestly think, is the single most ethnically diverse county in the world. Fort Bend County is 20% Asian, 24% Latino, 21% African American, 34% Anglo. You can't get much closer than one-fourth than that, right? It's a remarkable. Then, of course, you got one of those Anglo counties up here. You've got gaps. Anyway, the 9 counties CMSA of Houston covers 9,400 square miles. That is almost as big as the entire state of Massachusetts and considerably larger than the state of New Jersey. This is the blob that ate southeast Texas. Houston, as we know, was built on a crummy little bayou, 50 miles from any natural barrier in any direction, 50 miles from the ocean. The developers' dream: no mountains, no forests, no rivers, built by, for, and on behalf of the automobile, made possible by air conditioning, and we spread everywhere. And we had built a civilization totally predicated on single-family housing and the automobile. We've been asking people in our surveys, if you could choose how you want to live in Houston, what would you prefer? And here is just one of these robust findings. However you ask the question, there are 3 different ways of asking this question. You said, would you prefer, what kind of area would you like to live in? A single-family residential area, or an area with a mix of developments, including shops, workplaces, and restaurants? 50-50 split. You say, well, what kind of house would you like to live in? A single-family home with a big yard where you need to drive just about everywhere you want to go, or a smaller, more urbanized home within walking distance of shops and workplaces? 50-50 split. How should we spend our transportation monies? Spend them on expanding existing highways, or spend them on improving rail and buses? 50-50 split. Just striking. And we're trying to think, what percentage of Houstonians in this vast area of ours have the choice of living within walking distance of shops and workplaces? Maybe 7, 10%, 50% say that's what I want. And it reminds us, and that's the hope for Houston, right? And it's because 2 things are happening, but number 1 is we are a different folk than when we all went out to the suburbs in the 60s and 70s. In 1970, 2/3 of all American households had children living at home. Today, far less than a third. We think only about 25% when the next census comes out. 1/4 of all American households have any children at home. You have children at home, you got to go out to the suburbs, they need green space, they need yards. You don't have children. Whole bunches of us are empty nesters. The kids have grown up. I'm in my late 40s, early 50s. I work downtown. I love the ballet and the symphony. Do I still want to have to drive 2 hours every day? Do I want to have to mow the lawn? Give me a choice. And we're trying to attract all these young creatives. The millennial generations, sociologists talk about these guys as the postponing generation. They seem to be in no rush to get married, to have babies, to turn us into grandparents. They don't want to be out in the suburbs. They want all that diversity and street culture and sharing the public spaces that cities make possible. And the census says by 2020, we are going to count, we think, more households consisting of a single person living alone than households with children at home. So there is enormous opportunity. And the other point is that the fastest growing age segment of the American population, growing faster than any other segment, are men and women over the age of 80. That segment is growing faster than any other segment of the American population, and we have not seen anything yet. 76 million babies were born in that baby boom period between 1946 and 1964. The pig being swallowed by the python, the leading edge of those 76 million babies, overwhelmingly, of course, Anglos. This leading edge turned 70 this year. And every single day between now and 2030, 10,000 Americans will turn 65. And by 2030, the youngest of those 76 million will have gone off into the sunset. Maybe not at 65, but into the 60s, maybe in a very different, moving into, being replaced by a very different generation. So we are different. Folk, we have different needs. This is a city reinventing itself and rethinking how to address these needs. And here's just one other thing, just to remind us of how much we have changed. This is, believe it or not, east of Main Street in 1978. That's what downtown Houston looked like. Surface parking, land speculators buying up the land, waiting for the price to get right. In 4 years comes the total collapse of the economy, the worst recession of any part of the country, anytime since World War II, with the collapse of the oil boom. Here is exactly the same place 33 years later. We all know where we are, right? Suddenly, this is a city. This is a city reinventing itself, rethinking how it needs to be if it's going to have a chance for real prosperity and success in the very different world of the 21st century. And it combines both the human dimensions of a very different population and the ecological realities of living together in harmony with each other and in harmony with nature. That is going to be the central challenge and opportunity for all of us in the 21st century. Okay, enough for me. Let's have a discussion.